Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode. Okay,
That's the side. We should keep that.
so first of all, last week we did a recording and Tops told me that I had a spelling mistake. And just to admit it, I was not in English Advanced class, I was in English Standard. So as I mentioned last time, I need a lot of help from Grammarly, which unfortunately the tool that I'm using does not have Grammarly. So we picked up the mistake saying it's episode instead of episode, and now we're going with the flow.
Exactly.
So we're keeping with episode.
Yes. If you don't like it, put a comment. We may watch it, we may not, but
so before we start with the topic of the Great Migration, just a little bit of an update. So first of all, I've got shaven, new haircut. Not of my own free will, but kind of forced. Because I'm the kind of person that does not like to groom myself too often.
Yeah, I was like, who's that Dangus? Is that you? Bring my Dangus back.
I mean, look younger, right? So it's not bad. The second thing that I did was I've changed my settings a little bit on the mic because I think it might have been a little bit too bassy, too deep. I was trying to go for the podcast voice, but it was very hard to hear apparently.
Sexual chocolate.
So yeah, hopefully this is better. I know Tops sounds amazing as last time, so I think nothing's changed from his side, right?
What? You don't see the mannequin on the bed? Hello? Because you had a tree last time.
I can't.
And all 6 of our viewers were like, Dang has a tree. What do you have? A bed? Really? So, have a mannequin on the bed.
So here's the problem. Because of the framing and how I cut it, you don't see the mannequin.
Ooh, that's even better. Intrigue, drama. Do you see the vuvuzela behind me? Kind of right over.
Oh yeah, I see that.
From the 2010 FIFA.
Oh, you actually got it.
First in Africa. Oh yes, I didn't go, but I'm so special. A colleague went for me and she brought one back. So represent.
Question is, how much does it go for on eBay?
We can't sell that. We can't sell that. No, we cannot sell that.
You know, I'm actually curious. How do you spell it? Vuvuzela. 2010 World Cup, wasn't it?
Yes. South Africa.
Let's see the price.
South Africa.
Just a little bit of disappointment here, but it goes for $70.
Well, it was pretty much less than that if you went.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's basically plastic with the South African flag on it, and it was quite the annoyance to everybody who wasn't down with that, but it became a thing.
So for anyone who hasn't actually heard the annoying sound of it, do you mind giving a little demo?
Okay. Well, now you're going to make me use my lungs, but for my South Africans, I will do that to represent the country. I am Nigerian, but for my African, I will work and try to do this. Hold on.
So, just a little bit of a warning to anyone who's about to hear this. It is going to be extremely loud. So,
not necessarily, but we'll see. So, I'd like to represent my South Africans and the other African team, the national team, Bafana Bafana. Let me see if I can still do this. Did that work?
What was that? That sounded like
vuvuzela.
That did not sound like a vuvuzela.
That's a vuvuzela.
That sounded like a man who's trying to blow into a vuvuzela but ran out of breath.
No, I understand what you're saying. See the way it works. You're in the stadium, and all the people in the stadium blow it, and so when you hear it, it works better that way.
Okay, makes sense. Do you want to show a little bit of the vuvuzela? Because we only saw
Oh,
the tip of
sure.
it.
And
Yeah.
to all my South Africans, no offense, the accent. I did date a wonderful South African
Oh, that
woman
looks
once upon
so
a
good,
time.
man. That looks so good.
Let me try to get the bottom.
Yeah, get the bottom in.
So
Get
you
the
can
bottom
see
in.
the wick on the vuvuzela there.
So,
Shout out to my fellow Africans.
so this instrument, is it just like a pipe and there's a little, what do you call it, a reed, which then they blow, or how does it
Yeah,
work?
it's just a horn. Let me see if I can.
Right.
It's just a horn and
Okay.
basically no filaments, to your point. So just a little background for the audience. So typically this isn't wood, but a woodwind like instrument like a recorder or a flute.
Right.
The older models, usually made of wood, would have like a filament to help control and force the air movement through it. But technically, you don't need it. It just makes it easier.
Ah.
And so this, doesn't have any kind of filament because the effect you want you want that deep, loud sound to come out. But if you wanted to change that, you could have some kind of something at the aperture, the opening,
Right.
to try to
Like
change
a
this.
little reed kind of thing.
Exactly. For example, like the reed.
So I guess the next question is, when does one use this instrument? Is it for notifying like people of something, like sending messages, or is it like an actual instrument for music?
Oh, it was just something that I don't know like the background, but
Right.
basically it just became the thing of that particular World Cup. For those of you watching that might know more details, but it was something that you go to a lot of different events, like for example, United States. Um, those of you familiar with baseball, for example, in a lot of the stadiums, like Fenway Park in Boston, people throw around beach balls or might have a big stuffed hand with a finger, just little knickknacks. And the World Cup is no different. Typically in
Right.
World Cup matches, people will have their representative country flag. You'll see
Right.
that most prominently. But this was the first World Cup in my lifetime that I saw that they really had, apart from the different kind of knickknacks, a actual instrument unique to the locale that everybody had. So it made a unique and I don't know if there's something we can do, Dang. Maybe get a clip, fair use, and slip it in. Who
Well,
knows?
I was gonna read a little bit of history, not too
Oh,
much,
go,
just a little
oh,
bit.
go for it.
Please excuse me if I butcher some of the names and pronunciation of some of the tribes, but
I
it
am sure,
was
Dangos, you'll make it work.
it was introduced in 1910 by Prophet Isaiah Shambi, who is the founder of the church, to play alongside the African drums when dance and worship God. So that was 1910, right? Which is the Vuvuzela's initial creation.
Oh, oddly
Um,
enough, 100 years to that particular World Cup. Maybe that was
there we
something to do with
go.
it. Okay.
So
Go Dangus.
apparently the presence of that has been introduced into football in 1980s. That was the
Oh,
first match when that was actually used,
okay.
um, which was in the Durban-based Premier Soccer League in
Okay. Durban in South Africa. Okay.
Amazulu FC,
Okay.
which is formerly known as the Zulu Royals. There you
Okay.
go. And then yeah, so that was then picked to be part of the World Cup in 2010.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that history, Dangus. Thank you.
There we go. Learned something new today, actually. That's not bad.
You and I both.
I mean, I still don't like the sound of it, but you know.
Well, Dangos, you have to understand that most people did not, but we made it work.
Oh no, I mean when it was in the stadium with everyone blowing on it, like it really did give that atmosphere, right? Like it was a very nice atmosphere.
And I remember that first goal. Like this is why I love the World Cup because the commentators, I don't care if they're American, Australian,
Yeah,
England, they get all into it. So like that first match, right? Usually the opening match is like the host
the big
country
one.
plays,
Yeah.
right? And so like the first goal, like this player called Shabalala, and so like the British dude is like Shabalala, Shabalala, Shabalala. Oh my god! I mean, he just like was so into it, and it was just awesome to watch. It was just awesome to watch. Anyway, I digress.
So that was our little segue. But before we move into the main topic, one more thing. I've noticed that when you got up, you had the old man's like, and you know what? I actually am experiencing that right now as well. So when you get up when you were young, there was no noise. It was nice, swift, quiet. Now every time I get up, I'm like, yeah.
You know, you brought that up in Vietnam, and I hadn't realized I did that until you mentioned it. And you were right. I was like, wow, I do, you know. And not that I was like in just like pain per se, but you know, it's a consequence of being older. Like if you're sedentary, like if I sit, let's say, in a chair for like 3 hours reading,
Yeah.
versus 30 years ago, there's gonna be some creaks. So touche, Dangus, touche.
Yeah, just bringing it up because I think it's an interesting topic, which we'll dive into next time. But like, it's definitely a common trait in all maturing sort of males, especially when you're sitting around the barbecue, and at this age, you start hearing noises coming from everyone as they get up to go to the barbecue, get their food, whatever it is, right? Like sitting comfortably in a chair, you got your beer, and then as you get up, it's always like so much effort. Like it's just so much effort to get up. So so that was our segue. Back to the main topic of the Great Migration. So the first episode that we did, we sort of gave a little bit of introduction about ourselves. So I thought it would be a great topic to talk about in terms of your experience, Pops, in terms of coming from Nigeria to America. And then also my experience because my family actually came from Vietnam. Don't ask me what year they started going, but we came to Australia in 1994. The journey for that, we actually went through the Philippines. My parents actually went by boat, so they
Oh
went
wow.
actually through boats to Philippines, and then
So like literally fresh off the boat.
like
Wow. Okay.
literally fresh off the boat. And apparently I was born at that time. I was already like a toddler at the time, so
Oh
apparently
wow.
I experienced it, which I don't remember
Okay.
much.
Okay.
And then we went to Hong Kong from Philippines. So apparently
Okay. Wow.
my parents migrated to Hong Kong, then got caught and brought back to the Philippines, which then went through the process of either at that time the choices was either Australia, America. Um, that was the two main choices, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
and I think New Zealand might have been one as well. But
Okay.
yeah, so they chose to go to Australia because they thought that Australia was a prosperous country,
Okay.
and apparently they haven't heard of the American dream. But how life would have been different, right? But yeah, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have 17 minutes, which should be enough to cover both our stories. Not too much details, but just enough to give our viewers a little bit of understanding of what it was like, right? Because I think nowadays it's not really migration. Nowadays it's more of just, well, Australia is getting really expensive, so I'm going to get out of here to go to another country that's cheaper.
Right. Okay. No, makes sense. Makes sense.
So I'll start with yourself, Pops. If you can just run our viewers through, where it all began.
Um, so I think that's one of the great things that can inform how we got together. So I am Nigerian American, born in the US, and actually returned to Nigeria pretty much nursery school. So I don't remember any of that time in the US. So I did primary school in Nigeria. And so it was actually culture shock to come back to the United States in middle school. What, for those of us outside the US, we like secondary school typically. So class 6 to like the Form 1, that cusp is middle school in certain parts of the United States. And anyway, it was one of those things that I went to a parochial school, a Catholic school in Nigeria. one of the top schools, if not the top. And so I went from basically wearing uniforms every day to the land of opportunity, the United States at the
American
time,
dream.
the American dream. This was in the 80s. So, for those of you who know American history a bit, the 1980s were probably bar none one of the most excessive periods in the United States. It was bigger, faster, better, flashy, like everything, just over the top. And so, you have this Nigerian kid, and I sounded very Nigerian at the time. So when people would see me, they're like, "You're African." I'm like, "Of course I am." And, I went to school not really knowing much of the culture, going from a place that was basically homogeneously black to a place that was by and large homogeneously, well, I wouldn't say homogeneously, but predominantly Caucasian. And so I had to learn things that most Western kids take for granted, even if they're immigrants. Like, I wore sandals to school. I always wore sandals to school. I wore sneakers or trainers, as we called it in Nigeria, and I think other parts, only for like PE, whereas most kids wore that all the time. That was unheard of in Nigeria. You wore your
Mm.
school sandals, in a certain way, and so that's what I wore to school. And so I remember around November on the East Coast. So those of you familiar with New England, Boston, Massachusetts, that area, the northeast part of the United States, by the time you hit November, it's pretty cold. So if you're an African kid, particularly sub-Saharan African, wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and open-toe sandals, and this white stuff starts to come from the sky, and I freaked out. I didn't know what it was. And I was telling the kids, "What's going on? What is that?" And they're like, "That's snow." I'm like, "What's snow?" And of course, they all looked at me like I had four heads. But they soon realized that I literally did not know what snow was,
That was
right?
your first snow encounter.
Period. And
Okay.
so, but the kids there were great. I think the environment's really open in a lot of ways to immigrants. The area I lived was very, I would say, at least second generation
Okay.
immigrant. So most of the kids, their grandparents were immigrants, and so very diverse. And that was pretty much my introduction. How about
Nice.
you, Dennis?
So before diving into my side, um, I have a bit of a question in terms of, in Nigeria, you said you went to a Catholic school, right?
Yes.
So is that actually at that time? And I don't know what the demographic is right now, anyway. But is that like a common thing, or is it more of like a private school kind of thing?
So that's a great question. Really briefly, so today, and it's not too much different from when I went to primary school, Nigeria is separated into about 50% Muslim and 50% Christian,
Right.
predominantly Christian in the south and Muslim in the north. That's important in that, A, to go to a Catholic school, it was private and it was very expensive,
Okay.
right? Literally, if you went to a private Catholic school, particularly the school I went to, 9.5 out of 10, your parents were in government or very prominent or well to do.
Okay. So it's safe to assume that that was like more of a private thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So is it like big gaps in terms of the accessibility at that time? Like you had to be like super wealthy to get into that, or was it like you know just like something that was achievable by people?
Absolutely not achievable. Like, you
Okay.
had to be basically name brand, last name person. Um, yes, because it was such in demand because it was fantastic school,
Mm,
but it's private. You got to pay school fees, and even if you had the money, you were again either kid of expat
right.
or a prominent member of people who worked in the government, which my
Okay.
father was at the time.
And do you have to be Catholic to be in the schools?
Not at all.
Oh, okay. So it was more of just that you got the money to pay, then that's it, right?
Well, sidebar. Nigeria, I think probably 2015 or earlier, basically won the award. I think National Geographic did a study of one of the most religious countries on the planet.
Oh wow.
Nigeria is very like pious, very religious. And again, not to say good versus bad, but religion is like all encompassing, like very
Okay.
super religious um, in terms of church attendance, mosque attendance. And so to say you are an atheist, particularly when I was growing up, even today, is just unheard of. Like, oh, you're just confused. You just don't know Jesus or you don't know Allah, right?
Mm.
So the thought of you not being part of a major religion or agnostic or even atheist is virtually unheard of.
And like, maybe we dive into this topic a little bit later.
Yeah,
Because
because I want to
it's
make sure you
completely
have
wrong.
some time. Yeah.
Yeah, because like I really am interested as to like how did like Catholic and Christianity came about, right? Because in Vietnam, it was mainly Buddhists and like monks and stuff like that, and then it was introduced, I think, by the Western world, the whole
Okay.
Catholic thing, right?
Yeah. Similarly in Nigeria.
Yeah, so I'd be curious, interested to see the differences as to how each side was introduced. So that might be a different topic. So
Oh, for sure, because yeah, that's definitely its own ecosystem. Because a spoiler alert, that relates in how I got my government last name.
ah,
Yeah.
there we go. So from my side, again, I was a very very little kid. I mean, from what I've been told, and from what as much as I can recollect as a kid, um, my parents went to the north of Vietnam because apparently that was where everyone basically got onto the boat and departed from there. It
So
was
is that like Hanoi or somewhere near
it was
there?
actually it's further up northeast. So
Oh, okay.
there's
So
there's
closer
a
to China.
yeah, it's closer to China kind of thing, but more on the borders.
Okay, gotcha.
Maybe if I can, maybe if I could share a little bit of how do I do this? Sorry, I'm still trying to work out how do I. There we go. This is good. So I will share my screen.
Sure.
I don't know how well this is going to show up
I
on
was gonna
the.
say like,
No, I mean, look, we haven't tested this before, so we'll see how it goes. But this is. There we go. So I'm gonna zoom in, and this should give a little bit of understanding to the rest of us. How does one use?
you need to grab and then
Yeah,
slide. There you go.
yeah. So I was grabbing the recording screen, which wouldn't have worked.
Wouldn't it
so,
be cool if it did? Okay.
so this is Vietnam, right? Vietnam is this S-looking shape of a land, which is starts around. So here's Hanoi, right? So you see, if you follow this whole area here, and this is the north. So basically, Hanoi is somewhere around
Yeah, just move
here.
up a bit. Yep,
Yep.
right there.
So the place where people departed from was
Like how
all
long?
the way to the right of Halong, but even there, at
Oh,
around
wow.
this area. So
Okay.
the reasons
Okay.
why that was chosen, I believe, and again, I'm just guessing, is because
Hmm.
one, it's close to the China borders, right?
Gotcha.
And then also, it's a quick way to go across here to go to the Philippines island.
Okay, that makes sense.
So Philippines is
Okay, like,
Malaysia, right?
yep,
Yeah.
Manila and what have
So
you.
basically, what you're going around is to that side. So that's
Oh,
the
that
track that
makes
they usually take, right? Which is either through here or through down this way.
okay.
Okay. So that is how that came about.
Okay.
Now, how do I stop? There we go. So
Awesome.
apparently, it was 1 or 2 ounce of gold, I think, at the time to get, or was it like 4 ounce of gold or something like that? Like it's like a number of ounce of gold per person. If you're
Oh
in
wow. So sorry to interrupt. So payment was literally in like gold.
it was actually gold
That's so
because
cool.
the currency at the time was not that great. And
Ah,
also in terms of value, gold holds that value, right? Whereas during the war and the great, idea of like from when my parents left Vietnam, war was kind of already over, right? But
Okay.
the aftermath of war,
Of course, of course.
which then basically decreased the value of the dollar, the
That
Vietnamese
makes sense.
dollar, and therefore gold was more cherished, right? And everyone basically, even until now, really, I think it's something that people kept on, is that rather than storing money, everyone in
Mhm.
Vietnam stores gold. So
Uh,
yeah,
okay. Because the reason I bring that up is that United States got off the gold standard, and I believe I want to say the year before I was born, so early 70s. And so it's interesting that in your case, in my opinion, they made the smarter decision looking back. Um, okay, but continue.
so yeah, so that was where we left, and the stories I've heard was pretty bad.
Okay.
So along the way, ships were wrecked, people dying.
Okay.
Um, from what I heard from my parents, like they found a few islands. They went there, basically had to scavenge for like food, rice, all that stuff. And they were lucky at the time because they had a crew, I guess, that was pretty helpful to them. And they managed to be able to go into the islands, get a few rice to make like it was like from what I heard is that they had like this much rice, right, to share amongst
Right.
like
Sure.
7, 8 people. So what they did was
Okay.
they used the water, they boiled the rice in there, but basically it was fully just water. Like it was like
Yeah.
very liquidy.
To move it around, kind of like a gruel, if you will.
Right.
So, would you say that's similar to a lot of the migrations that happen from like North Africa to Europe? Obviously, different peoples, but the concept of essentially moving for a better life, almost against all odds. Would you say that's
Yeah,
accurate?
I think like so there was a two major migrations, right? So one was after the Americans withdrew, they basically pulled as many people as they can from the using the helicopters and the vehicles they had to
Right.
get people refugees out of Vietnam, right?
Okay.
So I think a lot of the American Vietnamese that established in America came from that origin, which is the the actual official way of moving. Then you've
Gotcha.
got the I guess the refugees that did the illegal migration way, which was going through boats and
Sure.
all that
Sure.
stuff. Um, the thing is, like, it wasn't. I guess like it wasn't because war was going on that they wanted to move, but it was the ideal or the idea of people who has gone before them sent back
Sure.
letters saying, "Oh, it's such a great
Yeah, it's
country,
awesome. Yeah, of
lifestyle, it's
course.
awesome."
Of course.
And that's why, like, people continued wanting to move, right? Up until the point where Vietnam was then stabilized and everything was all good again. The funny thing is that idea of it's better over here is something that still is within that country. So, every time you go back to Vietnam, people talk and they're like, oh, it must be great to live in America or in Australia.
Yeah.
And you're like, nah, man, like, not
Yeah, same,
really.
same deal with Nigerians. There's actually a word for it as well. Okay.
And then the funny thing is, it's so funny to see Vietnamese now coming from Vietnam to Australia and get that dream, that bubbles bursted because they're like they thought like getting on the plane, they're
Yeah,
gonna
the
like
streets are paved
yeah.
with gold.
And a lot of my cousins who came over here, they were pretty shocked as well. Even my fiance, she came from Vietnam, not through migration, but like on her own accords. And she was just shocked the fact that it's not as easy as people think.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll talk about the lifestyle a little bit later on. But in terms of the migration, both Philippines,
Mhm.
and we were in a refugee camp in Philippines. I can't remember where. And this is the part where I actually remember a little bit as a kid.
Okay.
So I think I was around 5 years old or 4 years
Okay.
old. We were in a refugee camp. My dad at the time was still in. For some reason, I'm not very clear on how this happened, but my dad was moved to Hong Kong,
Mhm.
and he was a teacher there. We were in the Philippines refugee camps, and then for somehow my family was then moved to Hong Kong with my dad.
Okay.
and then we were caught in this great crackdown on illegal immigrants and stuff like that in Hong
Oh,
Kong,
wow.
which then they brought back to the Philippines refugee camps.
Wow.
That's where I went to, a little bit of the primary school, kindergarten, kind
Okay.
of
Okay.
toddlerish kind of class.
Yeah.
But when I was in Hong Kong, I learned Chinese, so
Really?
Cantonese.
I
Yeah.
did not know that.
So I was actually able to speak Cantonese, and when we were in Philippines again after Hong Kong, apparently, this is what I've been told. I don't recollect this, but apparently I was very good with Chinese, so I became a translator for the nurses,
Oh, wow.
and apparently they paid me with biscuits and cookies.
Sweet deal. Sweet
Um,
deal. That's awesome.
so yeah, so that was it, and like the lifestyle that we had was pretty rough. We were in sort of like you would call it like shacks set up with like 2 levels, and
Mm-hmm.
we had the beds at the top, and then you basically
Yep.
had an open area. Oh, sorry, hang on a second. That's the alarm. I will stop that for now. So yeah, we had that lived in that kind of area with other refugees, and then we knew a family friend or someone who introduced me part of the whole introduced to us part of the whole Catholic missionaries or whatever you want to
Gotcha.
call them.
Yep. Missionary. Yep.
And he basically helped us move from Philippines to Australia.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
So the funny thing is, there was a choice between America or Australia, and apparently, what my dad said is that after hearing stories from America, he didn't think it was that good, and also everyone was going to America, so it was much harder to get to America than Australia, right? Because that was basically the preference, the American dream, right?
Yeah, it's funny that in Nigeria, the preference was to go to the UK. Even today, like people are like, what are you going to America for?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point that with your family, it was most people desiring to go to the United States, but your dad just said, you know what? I think we do better to go to Australia.
Yeah, I think what he saw was that, in America they get involved in a lot of things, as in terms of outside international mediation
Really?
stuff.
No, I don't know that I've ever seen. Really?
And I think what he saw was also Australia was very isolated, meaning if
Yes.
something does crack down, Australia would probably be the last to be,
Yeah.
invaded.
Yeah, they mind their business versus
Yeah.
the USA. I'll say it.
So that's probably why he chose it. And to be honest, I don't think it's
Oh,
a
sorry to
bad.
interrupt you,
Yeah.
Dangus. Okay, for you Americans watching, I love the United States of America. I'm a veteran. Okay, um, go USA. Go ahead.
So yeah. What I was saying is that I think it wasn't a bad choice. I mean, sometimes I wish I grew up in America. Like maybe I could have been somewhere, somebody, right? But I think
I could have been the contender.
yeah.
I could have been somebody. That's from a movie. I'll let the viewers figure it out.
But for me, like Australia, it's good. I think like the benefits and the way that it takes care of people is good. But it's not as aggressive as I would say, in terms of getting itself in the league kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like if you think about it, like you got like America and China fighting the whole like power struggle thing.
Sure, world superpower
Yeah,
thing.
superpower thing. Whereas Australia's like, well, you know what? We're just gonna grow our sheep and start sending cottons overseas and minding our own business. So it's good in a way because it's peaceful. It's good, but yeah, I don't know. It's always like that. What if, right? What if in the
No, I
parallel
mean,
world?
I hear what you're saying. I mean, a lot of times I joke, but it's true. Contrary to most immigrants, my life in Nigeria, I wanted for nothing. I went to private school. My dad, government. I mean, a phenomenal life. No reason to come to the United States. But there were circumstances I won't get into that my mom thought, you know what, you guys should have returned. And we actually left a very good life for a very hard life in the United States. Very hard for a long time.
On that point, this is very interesting because I actually had the same thought with my dad a while back when I went to Vietnam a couple of years when I was like a teenager. So at that point, your brain's developed a little bit, you understood a
Sure.
lot of it. So I went to Vietnam with my parents, and he introduced me to all his friends before he
Mhm.
migrated. All his high school friends, all that stuff. They were all like directors, they were all presidents, they were CEOs, and I was like, why did we move? Because he said like if he didn't move, he would have been with that
Oh, sure,
thing.
sure.
And I was like, well, that's an interesting thought, right? Because like the what if you didn't move? I could have probably been this sport rich brat.
I definitely would have. If I never came to the States, I wouldn't know what hard work was. Like it would just be something I see other people doing for
Mm,
sure. So I'm grateful despite the challenges. But you're absolutely right. If I'd stayed in Nigeria, yeah, I just would have been one of those rich kids that
mm.
goes to private school. Your name gets you through places, and no worries.
And I guess like my next question to you, I guess, is do you think because of the experience that we had and how we came to Australia, America, right? There's there's that tie into our origin country more than most kids who basically are born and raised in this country now. Like for me, like personally, I I think I've told you many times. Like I am Australian, but I consider myself very tied into the love for Vietnam. Like I love speaking Vietnamese. I love having Vietnamese friends. I love going to Vietnam. I love investing into businesses and stuff when I can or wherever I can in Vietnam, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of growth, a lot of potential, but at the same time, there's like I don't know, there's just something like that's something that just wants me to be drawn back into sort of Vietnam, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me, I struggled for decades because, I'm technically both, right? I'm
Mm,
technically a citizen of both, but anybody from either will know I'm not 100% in their camp. So I struggled with that for a long time until I got back to where I started, which is Nigerians accept me, Americans accept me
mm,
most of the time, right? And you kind of form a unique new identity. I also think the passage of time helps. Culture
mm,
in the United States has changed very much since I was young in the country. The Deputy Treasury Secretary of the United States is a Nigerian. That would have been unheard of 30 years ago. Absolutely unheard of.
right.
And so, in addition to your point, my wife is like what I call like a real Nigerian, grew up in Nigeria and sounds Nigerian, unlike myself. And so that kind of, I wouldn't say forced me, but allowed me to really get me some street cred.
Mm,
The outfit I'm wearing, she had made for me, custom made. The parties I go to the Owambes, and Nigerians know what I'm talking about, particularly Yoruba people, like these big, all hangout parties that go on all night. Like it's a thing. I go to those all the time versus you know, even Nigerians that have lived here all their lives that haven't gone back. And so I think really what was a challenge in the beginning is now is like the best of both worlds.
mm. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying that I'm not appreciative of my position at the moment, but it's just like this I don't know, it's just that urge deep within myself, right? Where it's just like one of these days I want to move back to Vietnam. I want to establish a life there. I want to live the life of the community, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And maybe in time, if I'm super rich. Uh,
Well, I went through the same thing as well. So I think it's actually quite common as you mature and get older that going back to your roots, because I went through that. So
mm,
I see where you're coming from. There were huge gaps of time. I never even thought of Nigeria went back, and all of a sudden, probably around age 20, late 20s, I
mm.
started to go back almost every other year after not going back in over a decade.
But
So
but
I
see,
definitely,
that's the thing with with the kids that are born and raised in Australia or America, with that, even if they have the ancestral background, right? I don't think they have that same feeling that we have. Right?
Oh yeah, I think it definitely comes with like not only being from there but living there, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people like, oh, you're not really Nigerian. So when they find out that I speak Yoruba, I'm by no means fluent, but I speak it and I understand it. And I actually lived and went to school. I mean, that shocks people when they hear my voice.
Mm.
I sound very American. And so they're shocked that like they from the way I talk, they know, oh, this dude has like lived there. Like he knows street corners, he knows areas, he knows neighborhoods. I can point you to my grandmother's house. My father lives there. My uncles, my aunts, where I went to school,
Mm.
events I went to. So it wasn't a very long time in Nigeria, but long enough. And since it was earlier in life, much more of an imprint than it had been later, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So we're a little bit over time, but I think that was a good point where we stopped. Because we want to tease our viewers a little bit so that they join the next episode to know a little bit more.
All 6 of you. Thank you.
All 6. We've doubled in viewers. That's great. But yeah, I think next episode we can dive a little bit deeper into how we establish ourselves.
Yeah, I think we were going to talk about, let me
Yeah.
see, like primary school or something.
No,
Something like that.
Tops, it's not scripted. What are you looking at? It's
Oh, wait, it's not scripted.
it's not scripted.
Yeah, we're just going to do random stuff with no cue cards. No cue cards.
Also, I am not drunk, if anyone's asked. It's the way that the camera, for some reason, reacts with my face. Lighting is pretty good in here. I don't know, my skin's not red, but my face is red. And no, it's not the Asian flush. I have not had alcohol. I have to explain that to everyone every time I get on a video call. I'm like,
okay, so from a Gen X or millennial, you don't have to explain everything. Sometimes you just let it ride.
No, it's just because I can see my red face. It's so
but
annoying.
Trust me. I don't know how it's an experiment here. Just say I'm Gen X. You're like, oh yeah, we're not gonna get an explanation.
But yeah, thanks again for watching us, and I know Tops don't like this, but please like and subscribe because we are trying to grow the channel. Look, everyone does it. I have to.
Okay, all right. If you like it, subscribe. If you want to watch.
And if you have anything else that you want to ask, there is the comment sections. Well, once the video is uploaded, of course. But I think we'll go for a few more rounds of offline recording. Maybe I'd say give it 6 more rounds, yeah, before we go into the whole live.
We'll see. Like you said, unscripted. We'll see. But thank you guys for watching.
All right, well, that's it for us, and we're going to sign off now. Thank you again for watching, and any last words, Tops?
Vote. I'm kidding.
Actually, give me one inspirational quote of the day.
Oh, wow. Really?
Putting you on the spot right now.
Here's a good one. It's an old Japanese, I think, proverb.
Okay.
And it goes, I don't know who it's attributed to, but it says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today.
I mean, if you convert that to, more recent saying, the best time to buy Bitcoin is 20 years ago, but the best time is still today.
Actually, just spiked, but that's not that's not episode. Let's not go there.
It makes sense, doesn't it? It's like, when everyone's sitting there, they're like, oh wow, everyone's making a lot of money on this. Should I buy? And the guy's like next to you is like, you should buy.
It was funny, like when it was nothing. A mutual acquaintance of mine, which won't be named, was like, you should buy this Bitcoin thing. I'm like, so I'm gonna keep this crypto thing on slips of paper. It's like $1 then. It was like
oh, man.
But anyway, thank you all for watching. Until next time.
All right. Have a good one. Peace out.
Peace.